"Get your hands off my kid!" I didn't shout it so much as throw it across the driveway like a hammer, because two men in stiff blue uniforms had Luke's arms twisted behind his back and were muscling him toward a black van with a dented quarter panel and a plate I still remember. 3D27. The taller one flashed a shiny badge with no number and said my son was being processed for youth standards violations, and in that instant, Willow Creek Meadows stopped feeling like a neighborhood and started feeling like a trap. You know what I mean. My name is Ethan Brooks. I fix old barns for a living. I moved our family out to the edge of Somerset, North Carolina, for big skies and maples that turn the color of pennies in October. I get up early. I mow straight lines like a ball field on Sundays. I coach JV baseball. When the season needs extra hands, we're not fancy. We're steady, or we were. Until a woman with a pearl smile and a clipboard knocked on my door at 6:02 a.m. and fined me $500 for non-compliant flag lighting, visible sports equipment, and improper curb paint too. Her name was Lorraine Caldwell, president, and she told me standards don't keep themselves. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh, so I did what rule followers do. I re-angled the flag light with a level-rolled Luke's hoop into the garage, painted the curb numbers with the exact swatch from the little code book they gave us at closing, emailed photos and receipts, and she wrote back, "Thank you for your cooperation." Like I had just graduated into being a good neighbor, but then a pickup with a magnetic decal that said Compliance Patrol started idling at the end of our cul-de-sac at odd hours, and neighbors whispered about tickets for chalk drawings and wind chimes. A woman 2 doors down said her grandson got a warning for riding his scooter on the sidewalk without a helmet. I kept my head down and my records tidy because that's how I was raised. You follow the rules, and you document, and then a final notice landed in my mailbox with a red stamp that read, "Escalation authorized." I called to ask what escalation meant, and Lorraine said very slow and pleasant removal of persistent problems. Then she hung up and left the dial tone to explain the rest. I can tell you the exact second it boiled over because it's burned into me. 7 p.m. The sun slid across our driveway and caught chalk dust in the air till it looked like glitter. Luke was in his faded Wildcats jacket, shooting free throws. I pulled in with screws and sweet potatoes and heard a sound I never want to hear again. Dad helped me. It wasn't loud. It had that low break in it, like something is wrong. In a way, hugs. Don't Fix 2 men in dark blue uniforms had him by the arms. The big one had 4 arms like hams, and the smaller one kept scanning the street like he was checking for witnesses. Cheap badges. No cereals. Enforcement stitched like a brand, the big one said. They were hauling my son to the Cypress Hollow Youth Compliance Unit, and he said it the way people say. Courthouse, like the word, carries its own badge. The smell off them was plastic and cologne, and something nervous. I put the groceries straight on the concrete and stepped between Luke and the van, with my hands low and open so nobody could say I went at them. "Release my son and show me your identification," I said. Flat, the big one sneered, like sneers are a language, and told me they had HOA authority, and interference was a crime. That's the moment Paige Turner, my neighbor with the permanent ponytail and a bigger heart than this whole county, came out with her phone up high and said, "I'm recording her." Voice shook just enough to make me love her forever. The smaller guy twitched because phones change math. Luke jerked his arm, like ripping free of a bad dream, and dove behind me. And the men broke. They backed toward the van, pointed at me. said I didn't know who I was dealing with. Then they drove away like cowards, who've just realized the camera sees everything. The sheriff's office sent Sergeant Daniel Ruiz professional calm. In that way that makes other people calmer, he took statements from me and Luke and Paige. He walked our driveway like it was a story. Written in rubber and scuffs. I gave him the plate. The time, the video, the red stamped notice. He didn't roll his eyes. Didn't call it crazy, just said, "We're going to handle this." I believed him, but I also know the difference between hoping a system works and making sure it does. So after the patrol cars left, I poured coffee. I didn't need, and sat at the kitchen table and started my own work. I looked for the Cypress Hollow Youth Compliance Unit in county records, state facilities, private registries. Nothing, but I did find a slick website with stock photos of kids in polo shirts and legal language that sounds like real legal language until you actually read it. The domain was registered 12 days earlier. Through a proxy, the phone number was a voicemail that said extension full. I printed everything and laid it out like lumber on sawhorses. Then I opened the HOA Bylaws, read the enforcement section. Line by line, fines for grass height and hedge width and the color of holiday lights. After January, a clause about unsecured trash lids. Not one word about detaining anyone. I highlighted that and emailed a copy to myself. Then I took a slow walk down the block to test what I already felt in my bones. The O'Neills said 2 men in similar uniforms told their 12-year-old to get off the sidewalk or he'd be cited the Garcias. 2 streets over got a letter about their son's paper route being an unapproved business. The worst was the Andersons on Willow Lane. Their 15-year-old had been taken off his bike and held behind the clubhouse for almost an hour for processing until his older brother came home and asked loud questions. Same description as my 2, sometimes a third with more serious gears and on his belt, like a stage prop. That evening, a certified envelope slid under our door with language so smooth it could almost pass for reasonable, due to continuing disturbances related to youth behavior. Enforcement may act without prior notice to ensure community safety. The return address, said Caldwell Community Solutions, LLC. The forwarding number on the Compliance Patrol decal rang the same place I pulled the LLC at the Secretary of State site, because paperwork is a trail. If your patient had formed 6 months ago. Registered Agent Lorraine Caldwell. And then the HOA treasurer, a quiet man named Nate Holland, who keeps his lawn like a cutting mat. Texted me from an unknown number after I asked a pointed question in the board email thread. He sent a screenshot of a payment off ledger. He wrote Caldwell. Community Solutions, paying Iron Falcon Compliance. $2,800 youth mitigation. And night patrols. He told me he'd warned Lorraine the payments were illegal, and she told him to stay in his lane. Yeah, that happened. I'm no soldier, and I am not law enforcement before Barnes. I fought wildfires out west. That job teaches you to read wind and think 3 ridges ahead, to tag times, and know when a glowing log in the duff becomes a crown fire. If you don't deal with it, now that part of my brain took over. I called Kendra Fox, a lawyer, who once walked my buddy out of a zoning mess with a letter so clean it cut like glass. She read the bylaws and said, "An HOA cannot detain anybody in this or any other world. And if a contractor is impersonating an officer, you have criminal exposure, stacked like cordwood." I called Mike Redding, a retired paramedic who installs security systems. Now asked him to make my porch and driveway see like an eagle, he said. Give me 2 hours and a ladder. Paige started a neighborhood text thread. We spread quiet word. No confrontations. Cameras up. Lights on. Documentation wins. That was our mantra. They came back Thursday, 4:21 p.m. The van slow on purpose. 3 men this time. The big one I later learned was named Roy Bennett. The jittery one was Caleb Dwyer, and the third, with better gear, was Sean Beasley. Crisp uniforms. Voices set to fake official. Roy called out. Luke. Brooks, you are under arrest for repeated standards violations and failure to comply with citations. Sean held a document that looked like a court order. If you've only seen court orders on TV, Luke met them eye to eye, like we practiced, and said, I want identification from all 3 of you, and I want to call my father. Steady voice, more courage than I had at 16. They escalated. Sean stepped forward and let his handcuffs dangle. Caleb fidgeted and scanned the street, Roy said, or we use force, that's the line. So I stepped out of the garage shadow and said, That's far enough, hands where the cameras could see them. Body between their hands and my kid Paige on her porch. Filming 2 other neighbors, filming, because a lens is a kind of shield. When the truth is on your side. Roy moved for Luke. Sean reached toward his belt for something that might have been a taser or a convincing prop. Caleb said, Roy, maybe we should. And we didn't wait to find out how he finished that sentence the night before Mike had run us through scenarios. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because panic is a lousy leader. We separated targets, avoided anything that could be called a strike. Used basic control holds. You learn coaching teenage boys. And from a first aid class, I took Roy's arm and weight where he couldn't hurt anyone. Mike stepped from the hedges and rolled Sean's wrist down and away. Caleb dropped to his knees like a man who understands. The math just changed. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got to pretend they were in charge anymore. And I said it slow and clear for the camera mics. You are under citizen's arrest for attempted kidnapping and impersonating an officer. The words tasted strange. They also felt true. Sergeant Ruiz rolled in fast patrol cars. Boxed the van. Crime scene techs photographed the cuffs. The fake letter with its stolen seal. The clipboards and zip ties and forms that used the word processing like it was holy. They bagged a burner phone in a paper envelope. Caleb started talking before anyone asked, which I'm told is common. When the show collapses, Ruiz listened, kept his face still. Read writes like he'd done it 1,000 times. Mike handed over multi-angle footage. Paige airdropped me and I airdropped the sergeant. My hands didn't shake until the work was done, and then they shook like I'd run through a storm. The burner phone turned out to be a gold mine, threads from a contact labeled CCSLC Escalate at Brooks, detain if necessary, board authorized invoice, Raven if over 30 minutes on site, a photo of our porch at 6:11 a.m. Captioned kid usually leaves by 7:20 spreadsheets with names and addresses and school schedules, and notes that read Dad Coach, Evenings Home and Mom Tuesdays Late, a column called Data Source, with most entries marked Public or Drive-By, and 3 marked Vendor, which sat in my chest like a cold coin. Ruiz saw it and swore softly in Spanish, in the tone of a dad first and a sergeant second. He called his lieutenant, and the DA and Nate texted again because conscience is louder than fear. Once it wakes up, he sent a PDF of payments from Caldwell Community Solutions to Iron Falcon Compliance. Memo lines, youth mitigation. An after-hours check compliance push, he said. Lorraine told him to move the payments off the main spreadsheet and route questions to the LLC. That's when I knew we didn't just have a couple of cosplay tough guys. We had a machine. We didn't storm the clubhouse with pitchforks. We did something slower and better. The DA drafted what they needed. Kendra walked the civil side to make sure it would stand. Ruiz asked to send a message from Roy's seized phone to CCSLC. Brooks' operation complete need payout and new assignments. 8 p.m. at Clubhouse. 3 dots, then approved board will convene. Do not be late. Lorraine liked doing things in public so people could watch her do them. She once told me that in a way that had nothing to do with transparency, I showered, pulled on a clean flannel, dropped Luke at Page's with pizza and a movie, and drove to the clubhouse, the way you drive to a fire. Not fast, not slow, assured that your job once you arrive is to be the calmest person in the room. The board had lined up folding chairs in neat rows. Lorraine stood at the mic with a gavel she loved like a pet. Order, she said, though nobody was out of order. She spotted me and smiled. The way people smile when they think they outrank you. We will address the disruptive Brooks household. I raised my hand like a schoolboy and didn't wait to be called. I walked up front with a stack of paper and a little drive and told it straight. My name is Ethan Brooks. And in the last week, my family has been sighted threatened. And 2 days ago, my son was nearly taken from our driveway by 3 men in uniforms, paid with HOA funds, routed through a shell company, controlled by the president of this board. The room made the kind of sound crowds make when they aren't sure they're allowed to react. I laid it out in the exact chain the DA asked for. Video of the attempt, photos of badges without numbers, and the van with TXA 3D27 copies of fake court letters, with a seal lifted from Google, the Bylaws paragraph that says there is no enforcement authority beyond fines, screenshots of CCSLC, telling men to escalate and detain the payment ledger from Caldwell Community Solutions to Iron Falcon Compliance. The calendar invite for the 5:58 a.m. Youth Mitigation Patrol that came from Lorraine's HOA email to an address we now knew belonged to Roy's burner. I spoke in the calm. You learn on a fire line. I didn't say anything. I couldn't prove. I didn't use adjectives. I couldn't defend Lorraine. Laughed, actually. Laughed, called me dramatic, and said, anyone can fake screenshots and videos get edited. Smear, she said. Sergeant Ruiz stepped from the side aisle with 2 detectives and a printer-worn warrant, and the room changed shape. Ms. Caldwell. He said we executed a search at your office 15 minutes ago. Your desktop contains the same threads we recovered from this phone. Your external drive contains invoices to Iron Falcon. The treasurer Nate cleared his throat into the mic and said, I told her it was illegal, and she told me to move the payments off the spreadsheet. A board member far left forgot to cover his mic. And whispered Lorraine said the Brooks family had to be made an example. Nobody gasped. The whole room just inhaled and held. Lorraine reached for her gavel like grabbing a rung on a ladder that's already broken. You people don't understand. Order, she snapped, which told the truth about her better than I ever could. Hughes didn't raise his voice or posture. He stepped forward and said, Caldwell, please stand. Then he read charges I never imagined hearing in a building with a popcorn machine. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, extortion, impersonation of a peace officer through a contractor, misuse of funds. He turned her gently. The cuffs clicked. And in real life, that sound isn't loud at all. It's a tiny door closing on a room she used to control. I wish I could give you a ticker tape parade right there, but the ending wasn't tidy. People looked at their shoes. Some cried a man in a golf shirt asked if his grandson could ride his scooter the next morning, and Ruiz said, yes. The board voted to remove Lorraine and install a temp, and nobody looked thrilled for the honor. Paige squeezed my shoulder and whispered, your boy is at my place, second slice, and I laughed for the first time in days, because relief sometimes sounds like pizza. The days after were paperwork and repair. Luke slept with his door closed for a while, and I built him a new backboard out of oak, because my hands know how to say what my mouth can't. The sheriff's office pulled more threads, Iron Falcon folded. Roy and Caleb cut deals. Sean Lawyer, up the spreadsheets on the burner, had names that weren't ours, and families got calls that made me grateful and sick. In the same minute I installed cameras at Paige's and the little free library on the corner. Because seeing helps, we started a Saturday thing called Watch and Coffee, where we talk about what real authority looks like and how to verify it, and what to do when somebody tries to scare you into silence. We talk about chalk and curbs and kids. We remind each other that order is supposed to mean safety, not fear, and that fear loves a clipboard and a made-up badge. You know what I mean. Here's the part that sits in my chest, that spreadsheet column for data source. Most rows said public or drive-by, and 3 said vendor. Nobody has told me who that is yet. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something that should worry all of us. Maybe it's a reminder that some fences look like fences, and others look like forms. I'll wait on the investigation to name it. In the meantime, I'll keep the porch light on, and the camera working, and my kid close because some work doesn't finish when the gavel falls. It just changes shape. I've replayed the cuffs clicking on Lorraine, and the gavel slipping from her hand, and rolling under a folding chair, and a kid picking it up and refusing to give it back. Justice doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like breathing normal again. It feels like my son stepping out at dusk with a ball under his arm, glancing back to be sure I'm watching, and smiling. When he sees I am, it feels like telling him, go ahead, take that shot. And knowing that if anyone tries to touch him again, the whole street will step forward with their phones and their voices and say no. It feels like the door on fear. Shutting slow like a screen door, settling after a summer breeze. Yeah, that happened, and it matters. So that's our story. A pearl smile and a clipboard, a black van, and a bad plate. A website bought 12 days before it needed to lie. A bylaw that never gave anyone permission to lay a hand on a child. A set of neighbors who decided recording counts. A sheriff who decided paperwork can be muscle if you use it right. A president who believed people are easier to manage when they're scared, and a father who believed fear is easier to beat when it's on camera, hook, twist, consequence. And now a question that won't sit down and be quiet. Where is the line between community standards and a system that bullies the people it claims to protect? Did we do right to set a sting instead of keeping our heads down and letting the board keep swinging its little hammer? Would you have done the same, or backed off and hoped it cooled? Drop your city and your local time. Tell me what you've seen. Where you live. Tell me where you think order ends and control begins. Share a win. Share a warning. Push back. If you disagree, I'll read every word. And if you're living through a mess like this, say the word and we'll shine a light together.